Nigeria to key into the Belt and Road Initiative of the People's Republic of China for economic and infrastructural development.
Federal government considers adoption of forensic and investigative auditing in fight against corruption.
President Muhammadu Buhari to host 50 young Nigerians expected to emerge from an ongoing nationwide student innovation challenge.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, our focus is on the gains of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, plus untapped benefits of traditional healthcare in Nigeria.
Yes, the ECOWAS chairman and Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari and majority of Africa's top leaders attended the just concluded Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, anchored on 8 major initiatives, including building Africa's infrastructural deficit, industrial promotion, trade facilitation, green development, and many more.
Indeed, Sharon, there are many more initiatives involved in the partnership, and this, of course, include the Africa-China Expo 2030, Africa Food Security, Local Currency Stabilization, Africa-China Development Fund, and Human Resources and Technical Cooperation.
Yes, Kingsley, you may recall that in 2016, China granted about $100 billion credit facility to Africa, and now in 2018, a big one, a $60 billion grant, or you can call it aid.
That's right, Shou. The president of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping, has often maintained that his country's model of engagement with Africa is a win-win cooperation. So, what is the response of African leaders to these partnership deals? What are the stakes for Africa and Nigeria in particular in the spirit of the emerging cooperation between Africa and China, the world's second-largest economy?
And that will be our focus on Good Morning Nigeria today as we interrogate the gains of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation.
We also have a second topic, and that will focus on the untapped benefits of traditional healthcare in Nigeria. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and it's good to have you join us on the program today, being broadcast as always live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. We are right here at the Abuja headquarters studios, and this is Nigeria's capital city.
And I am Sheung Olagunju. I join my colleague Kingsley to welcome you to today's edition. And as always, the complimentary segments of the program will be brought to you. They include the newspaper review segment, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment news. But for now, Comfort Amodo is ready to serve us the morning news. Hello, Comfort. It's over to you.
Hello, Sheung and Kingsley. Good morning. Here's the morning news. Nigeria is the key into the Belt Road Initiative of the People's Republic of China as an additional mechanism towards building further cooperation in the nation's quest for economic and infrastructural development. President Muhammadu Buhari, who stated this at the roundtable meeting during the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit in Beijing, said the initiative synchronizes perfectly with the economic recovery and growth plan of his administration.
Has a feel, a direct feel, not a remote feel, of what problems African countries have and what is the approach of the Chinese government and people to helping or partnering with us in solving these problems.
Buhari should actually stay here to get it done. You can't sit at home and get things done. You have to reach out.
The federal government is considering the adoption of forensic and investigative auditing in the fight against corruption with a determination to ensure that those who corruptly enrich themselves with public funds be starved of the proceeds and jailed if found guilty when tried in court. Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice Abubakar Malami affirmed this at the second annual International Forensic Conference of the Chartered Institute of Forensic and Investigative Auditors.
Forensic and investigative auditing, which has now been aggressively promoted by your association in Nigeria, has been recognized globally as an effective approach to fraud prevention and for gathering the needed prosecutorial evidence in financial crimes. Nigeria must therefore key into this global trend.
The Buhari Support Organization says it has repositioned itself to make positive contribution while working to ensure the successful re-election of President Muhammadu Buhari in 2019. The group equally acknowledged the need for continuity in governance as the only way the achievement of the current administration could impact the entire society.
Doing more with less. You can imagine the rise of the rails. Here in Abuja we have the metro, and rails are springing all over the country. Roads, southeast, south-south, southwest, northeast, northwest.
Understanding the problems of this country and then responding to them, whether it's with regard to food supply, jobs, industrialization.
In a few weeks from now, President Muhammadu Buhari will host 50 young Nigerians who are expected to emerge from an ongoing nationwide student innovation challenge. The second edition of the program held Tuesday in Kano with those innovators emerging top among 600 entries. Vice President Yemi Oshibajo at the event says the nation eagerly awaits a new set of innovators that would contribute to finding solutions to the problems confronting humanity.
Of talent. We're optimistic that the Nigerian universities will similarly play vital roles as incubators and accelerators for small and emerging business ventures. Bayero University Kano is already taking a huge step in this direction.
This kind of program, you find these young students, young innovators, they come up so that they can maximize the use of their potentialities.
The Emir of Kazaure in Jigawa State, Alhaji Najib Hussaini Adamu, has commended the Buhari-led administration for executing a series of developmental projects in the state. The Emir was speaking at the commissioning of Sustainable Development Goals projects in the Emirates.
It's demonstrated the seriousness and the commitment of the government to design and implement projects that are pro-poor, that will change the lives of the common man.
The Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onege, says the judiciary intends to fully professionalize its administration due to the peculiar position of the arm of government. He stated this at the opening of a national workshop for chief registrars, directors, and secretaries of the nation's judiciary.
With these peculiar needs, which may not of necessity cut across the other two arms of government, that is why you have to be professionalized. So you need to adhere strictly to due process.
Meanwhile, Nigerian Labour Movement is working with Solidarity Center of the Washington, D.C. to carry along workers-based organizations in government rehabilitation process of the Northeast. A meeting to facilitate that has taken place in Abuja, where recommendation on how to advance employment, decent work, social protection, and peace in conflict and post-conflict situations were discussed.
Most of them are killed on active service. I'm not happy because up till now, their benefits have not been paid.
We're here to really promote both the norms and standards of the international community.
The Independent National Electoral Commission has reiterated its commitment to conducting a free, fair, and credible governorship election in Osun State. This was at a policy dialogue with stakeholders on the critical factors and what the Commission should do to ensure successful poll.
One of the ways that the Commission has planned to handle this is that during this Osun State election, all our cubicles are going to be repositioned.
The idea is to interrogate the issues and profound solutions even before we get to Osun.
That's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Sheung and Kinsley after this break.
Thanks for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria. Time now to join our business desk for developments from the FOCAC meeting in Beijing, China, and other reports.
China National Petroleum Corporation has assured the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, of its unwavering commitment towards securing funding for the successful financing and subsequent execution of Ajaokuta-Kaduna-Kano pipeline project the boost for the project was revealed during a high-level meeting between the NNPC and CNPC management held on the sidelines of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit in Beijing, China. The AKK gas pipeline would enable connectivity between the east, west, and north that is currently non-existent. It would also enable gas supply and utilization to key commercial centers in the northern corridor of Nigeria, with the attendant positive spin-off on power generation and industrial growth. And the Nigerian Customs Service recorded highest monthly revenue collection of 140.4 billion in August 2018. Controller General of Customs, Colonel Hamid Ibrahim Ali, retired, described the feat as a result of the strategic deployment of manpower, upgrade on the electronic system from Nigeria Integrated Custom Information Systems to NICIS-2, which has blocked leakages, as well as strict enforcement of extant guidelines by the Tariff and Trade Department, resulting in high compliance. And away from home, South Africa President Cyril Ramaphosa is evolving measures to revive the economy of the country just as South Africa enters its first recession since 2009. Statistics indicates that South Africa's agricultural output fell by 29.2% in the second quarter, while the transport, communication, and storage sector fell by 4.9%. Mining output grew by 4.9% and finance by 1.9%. However, economic contraction in the first quarter was steeper than the initial record of 2.6%. And the equities market closed Tuesday on a positive note as NSE All-Share Index appreciated by plus 0.28% to close at 34,933.68 basis points, as against minus 0.03% depreciation recorded previously.
All right, thank you very much, Comfort, there for the business package and Good Morning Nigeria. We go over now to the front pages of some of today's newspapers to review the stories.
And yes, Kingsley, many of the papers today have their lead stories on the purported clash between the vice president and the former vice president over restructuring. So I'll start with The Guardian. And the main story on the front page of The Guardian, Osinbajo versus Atiku. Restructuring, vice president, former vice president in war of words over Nigeria's future. And then down below that one, federal government wants MTN to pay additional $2 billion in taxes, import duties with riders. Firms' share drops further by 33%, rejects Accountant General's claims. Investors differ on fines over proposed Nigeria's IPO. There's a quote, in fact, two quotes, still on the Osinbajo versus Atiku purported war of words over restructuring. And according to Atiku, Atiku quoted me as saying, that's according to the vice president, Osinbajo, quoted me as saying that the problem with our country is not a matter of restructuring, and we must not allow ourselves to be drawn into the argument that our problems stem from some geographic restructuring. Yes, I said so. Restructuring in whatever shape or form will not mean much if our political leaders see public resources as an extension of their bank accounts, end of quote. And according to Atiku Abubakar, my advice to the vice president is that he should choose whether he is for restructuring or whether he is against it, and stick to his choice. This continuous prevarication, this approbation and reprobation helps no one. Least of all, true progressives will know that Nigeria needs to be restructured and restructured soon, end of quote. Other headlines on the front page of The Guardian, down the front page, no party will win election through violence, says INEC. Labor unions lose 2,000 members to Boko Haram, and how $2 billion fintech challenge will boost financial inclusion. That's it from The Guardian. Kingsley.
All right, let's take a look also at the Nigerian pilot, which also leads with the report on the war of words between the former vice president and incumbent vice president on restructuring. You can see the quotes there extracted from the statements of the two leaders. We just read aspects of that. The incumbent vice president, Professor Yemi Oshibajo, is quoted as saying, "Restructuring in whatever shape or form will not mean much if our political leaders see public resources as an extension of their bank accounts." And then from Atiku, who was vice president from 1999 to 2007, it's a surprise that the vice president would take such a position and fail to appreciate the connection between Nigeria's defective structure and its underperformance. Details of the story can be found on page 4. Incidentally, the incumbent, Daily Sun also has that, I believe, yes. But it's not on the front page of the leadership newspaper. The vice president, the incumbent vice president, actually had a written response to the initial comments made by former vice president Atiku Abubakar with regard to options for restructuring. And it would appear that it's more a question of emphasis for either of them, because the vice president, that's say Professor Yemi Oshibajo, it's saying that you cannot talk about restructuring and then
putting some things in place.
Yeah, and forget. Yeah, in his words, you leave out the elephant in the room, namely corruption. And then, of course, the former vice president Atiku Abubakar is saying that the restructuring is the bane of the country's underdevelopment, to the extent that, yes, administratively and politically, if you do not restructure, then some of these issues that we're complaining about will continue to linger.
I don't think the vice president is against restructuring either. He just wanted some things put in place before that would be the case, while the ex-VP says it has to be done now. So we just, like I said, it's also the main story on the front page of the Daily Sun too. You have other headlines with you there?
That's right. From the Nigerian pilot, there was an incident yesterday. We reported also on the front page of the Nigerian pilot, immediately below the nameplate of the Nigerian pilot. Police raid Edwin Clark's Abuja residence. Police raid Edwin Clark's Abuja residence. We are not aware of the raid. That's according to the first public relations officer, and details can be found on page 5. Now, we won't be intimidated into submission. That's IPOP. Very quickly on the raid on the Chief Ike Clark's Abuja residence. That's in Asokoro. Some policemen were said to have invaded the residence, claiming that they were acting on the instructions of the Inspector General of police, and that there were allegations that there were some arms that had been stockpiled at the residence. Now, it turned out that after the search,
nothing was found.
Neither arms nor ammunition were found on the property. Now, the first public relations officer has issued a statement denying that the officers came from the Inspector General of Police, nor were they acting on his instructions.
Yes, and that seems to be reflective on the front page of the Daily Sun, which says IGP orders detention of 4 cops over Clark's home raid. Ijaw leader considers legal action.
That's right. So that's
the IGP is proactive in that regard. To just say that I have nothing to do with this.
Yeah, perhaps they were just on a frolic of their own, and if they were so acting,
that would be unfortunate.
Yeah, of course, the police high command will have to find out who gave the instructions and why the officers acted the way they did. But there must be a recognition, though, of usually the police have a right of search. There's no question about that. And if there is suspicion of an offense or a crime that has been committed or is about to be committed, the police have the right of search. But of course, there has to be some great deal of discretion. If your information isn't pointing to the fact that there's that possibility of an offense being committed or offense being likely to be committed, then you exercise a great deal of restraint, especially for a senior citizen like Chief Ike Clark, who was the equivalent of a federal minister of information up until 1975, and he also served as commissioner for education under Ogbemudia in the old Midwest state. All right, let's return to the papers. Leadership newspaper Leadership principal below the nameplate, we have a story. FOCAC, Nigeria benefits over $5 billion in projects from China. That's according to President Muhammadu Buhari. And Berlin conference on Boko Haram rakes in $2.5 billion. Details can be found on page 8. And then the lead story, of course, is on the furore over the police invasion of Ike Clark's Abuja residence. Now, more trouble for MTN as federal government demands $2 billion tax arrears. More trouble for MTN as federal government demands $2 billion in tax arrears. And below the photograph there on the front page of the paper, man gives out 2-year-old son as loan collateral. That's on the leadership. You can see that on the screen right away. Man gives out 2-year-old son as loan collateral. That's to be found on page 13. And NNPC and Chinese firms to build 10 biofuels complexes. Details can be found on page 34.
That's really a sad one. I mean, could that be due to poverty? Could it be? It's sad some actions some people take. And then I'm sure his reasons too will be as absurd as the action that he has taken.
There's no doubt about that, Sho. Oftentimes this will stem from ignorance. To say, look, I don't have money, keep my son for the purpose of doing this. It's an offense, by the way. I mean, it's
it's a form of slavery.
Yeah, it is significant that the creditor, obviously, hasn't played along with the debtor for that particular purpose. You cannot use a human being as a collateral. A human being is a person who has fully proceeded from the mother, and there's no reason why that should happen.
Other headlines quickly on the front page of the Daily Sun, aside the main one that we've talked about. Beside the nameplate, APC begins primaries September 20 with presidential. Insists on 45 million, 22.5 million, 7 million, and 3.85 million naira nomination fees. And beside the picture story on the front page of the Daily Sun, 2019, David Mark, Donald Duke joined presidential race in PDP SDP. PDP writes May, Merkel on State of the Nation. The IGP orders detention of 4 cops over Clark's home. We talked about that earlier. And below the picture story on the front page of the Daily Sun, a sad one, flood kills 16 in Kebbi.
Yeah, but the story of the fatalities arising from flooding in Kebbi, that story is particularly pathetic. The details indicate that one of the persons who passed away was a military officer who was trying to rescue a woman who was drowning. Unfortunately, he got swept away by the floods. The latest reports show that his body has since been recovered. And our hearts go out to those who have lost their loved ones. This has been a real year of fatalities arising from flooding.
Despite the warnings by the Nigerian Meteorological Agency, and we do hope that more preparations will be done to prevent this kind of occurrences. We'll quickly go to the editorial, or you have some others?
Yes, there are other headlines from the Nigerian pilot. The Nigerian pilot, just below the photographs there, the lead story, that's the clash between the 2 vice presidents, one former, one incumbent. Senator Mark, you have already read that from other papers. There's a story in greater detail on page 9 of Nigerian Pilot. It says 5.8 billion naira unpaid allowances. Legislative aides threaten to shut down National Assembly. And will support any presidential candidate that will embrace restructuring. That's according to Afenifere, page 5. And Jigawa set to admit Almajiri into science secondary schools. And also echoes of rule of law and national security. The DSS is saying will respect rule of law and protect all citizens. Details can be found on page 5.
Yes, Kingsley, on the NAS legislative aids, there have been some reports on this. We've heard quite a number of stories about this, that some of the aides are not being paid, and they've been threatening for a while.
That's right, that's right. I mean, the question to ask is, who has responsibility for paying the aides? And what is it that...
One would think that their salaries were input part of what the legislators were collecting as allowances.
It should be part. It's part of the National Assembly's budget, and if the National Assembly's budget is not under the control of the executive, why is it that the legislative aides who are fit and proper persons to receive the allowances are not earning those allowances? And why then will the figure balloon to 5.8 billion? Prompting the threat now of a shutdown of the National Assembly. We do hope that that will not disrupt operations, because the National Assembly is scheduled to reopen, to resume plenary later this month. Okay, now to the editorial which we take from the New Telegraph, and it's about the much-awaited national carrier that Nigerians have been agitating for. Nigerians await national carrier, and a quote right in the middle of that editorial: those genuinely clamoring for a national carrier are impressed with the success stories of continental ones like Ethiopian Airlines, Kenya Airways, Egypt Air, and South African Airways that have become formidable and efficient airlines. Kingsley, why can't we not? Why can't we? Well, I'm not sure what the paper is saying. Perhaps if we look
I
at
think
the
he's saying that the establishment of a national carrier for the country, Nigeria Air, is in top gear as a result of repeated calls from a section of the society. Nigeria Air is scheduled to commence operations on December 19, 2018. The proposed national carrier targets 81 routes, comprising 40 domestic, regional and sub-regional, and 41 international routes. And they recalled that in the early 1960s and 1970s, Nigerians took great delight in national companies like Nigeria Airways and Nigeria National Shipping Line, among others.
Well, that's the issue of a national carrier. It's been on the cards for a long while, especially since the liquidation of Nigeria Airways. And some weeks ago, we saw, if you like, the road show to investors in London with regard to the unveiling of Nigeria Air, as it is called. And I'm sure that all stakeholders, as the saying goes, are all waiting to see when the national carrier would have its wings.
I think that since we already even have a date, I mean, things are set to roll.
Well,
we hope so.
That some knowledgeable insiders are saying that's doubtful. All right, so that's the most that we can take. We'd like to take a short break now. When we return, we'll get into our conversation segment.
Yes, you're still on to Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA, and we're beginning our conversation now on the gains of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation as we join our foreign desk correspondent, Makut Simon Macham, via Skype. He is in Beijing, China. Hello, Makut. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Shem. How are you doing?
All right, Makut, I'm right here in the studios with my colleague, Sheung. The forum has ended, we understand. What are the highlights in terms of the resolutions?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. The summit has ended. Quite a lot has been agreed upon between China and Africa. In fact, yesterday there was a joint press briefing by President Xi Jinping and the co-chair of FOCAC 2018, President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, where they highlighted the resolutions that were adopted. Among them is the action plan for 2019 to 2021, wherein they stated that the two bodies have agreed to work on key issues, including infrastructural development, strengthening economic relations, and then deepening political engagements as well as partnerships. There's also the issue of peace and security, which was also agreed upon. But of course, you know, the main news that has been out there is the $60 billion that China again promised to make available to African countries for development purposes. So quite a lot has been agreed upon in terms of what Africa can access from these funds, and indeed people-to-people contact. They want that to be increased so as to consolidate on the partnership between China and Africa. Of course, Nigeria has its own take from that also.
About that $60 billion grant for various projects in Africa, what was the reaction of African leaders to this? immediate reaction, of course?
Well, of course, right from when the President Xi Jinping announced that figure, after his speech, you could see that he received a standing ovation, which indicated that, yes, Africa was quite interested and indeed welcomed the idea. The issue is that most African countries right now have infrastructural projects going on that are funded with Chinese loans and indeed some other agreements that they have signed. So most African countries, if not all, welcome this idea of another $60 billion. Remember that Nigeria in particular had benefited close to $5 billion from the from the 2015 announcement, when the first $60 billion was made available. So quite a lot is going on across Africa, especially in rail, roads, and power and other infrastructure that is being funded through this. And in this announcement also, the President Xi Jinping also announced that the debt of the loans for some poor countries, the poorest countries, so to say, in Africa, that was due for 2019 would be shelved. So there was quite a huge excitement on the announcements by the Chinese.
Makut, the footage from the summit gave the impression sometimes that you had a huge slice of the United Nations meeting in Beijing. What was the mood like in the course of the summit?
Sorry, I didn't get that very well. Please say.
I'm saying that the footage, that's to say the video clips from the plenary of the summit, tended sometimes to create the impression that you had a huge slice. That is to say, several members of the United Nations. If you like, it was like another UN meeting taking place in Beijing. What sense did you get in terms of the atmospherics at the summit?
Well, you're right, Kingsley. Of course, the UN Secretary General himself was here, and that is to underscore to you the importance of this meeting. And of course, Africa is always referred to as the untapped resource base of the world. And this meeting between Africa and China, which is, of course, a power that is, taking over the whole place, means a lot to the international community. Don't forget that for me, at the media center of FOCAC 2018, the interaction is not just between us and African journalists, but you meet journalists from virtually all international media houses here, and you wonder the interest in this. So the world is watching keenly what Africa and China are up to. But for Africans, I guess the issue is what can they benefit from Africa. And talking with some of the journalists, what the concern is, how is Africa able to turn this relationship into some sort of benefit that will be evident at the end of the day, not to give into the fears that, okay, this is another form of colonization again, and so on. So African leaders have a task to ensure that this partnership succeeds and is really beneficial to the ordinary man in every African state.
Makut, could you provide some specifics, for instance, with regard to facilities being provided for infrastructural development? I mean, the phrase is there, infrastructure development. What kind of infrastructure are we looking at? I mean, China, some analysts would argue, hits a bullseye by focusing on helping African countries develop their infrastructure. But what are the specifics arising from this summit?
Okay, well, part of the development China's agenda is the Silk Road Belt Initiative. I hope I got that right. That as part of that initiative, they want to ensure that trade between Africa and China is not hampered in any way. But of course, trade within China and within Africa itself has to be seamless. So a lot of emphasis is on railways, a lot is on aviation, making sure that there are roads, there is power, because that is something that is really critical. And during the speech by Xi Jinping, he particularly made reference to the issue of the free African trade, and that they are very interested in making sure that that succeeds. And of course, the issue of the single aviation initiative. So, in specific terms, the issue of power is very, very key. Science and technology, where, for instance, in Nigeria, you're talking about developing the NIGECOMSAT. There has been a need for another backup, which is on the cards. The Mambila hydropower, which has been ongoing, is partly funded by this benefits from the Chinese loans and so on. So across Africa, virtually all the countries, Ethiopia, Tanzania, South Africa, and so on, rail, roads, power, dams, so on and so on and so forth. Of course, education and health are on the cards also.
All right, Makut, we understand, that you have to go now, but just this last one for the road, so to speak. There was a sentiment expressed that right now China will be moving away from so-called prestige projects into projects that will actually help catalyze growth and development. How was this received by the summiteers?
Well, there's this impression being bandied around here that it's just a largesse, it's free lunch to Africa. But that is not the case because there are loans that have been received by African countries. Of course, there are grants among other things, but the impression by some ordinary Chinese is, of course, that while China is being benevolent, while some issues are still critical for them to take care of back home. But that is for journalists to try and explain the details of all these agreements, to also let Africans also know that this is not free lunch. This is money that would be monitored and indeed will have to go down to the ordinary man in Africa. Because if this money is just given without being utilized, then there are so many problems that would arise later. And of course, before I leave, I would like to also tell you that for Nigeria, the issue of industrialization is part of the next set of benefit that it wants to make these loans or whatever thing is going to access from this 60 billion and other things stick. Because agriculture, the equipment for mechanizing agriculture in Nigeria is very paramount to the president and indeed the government. So it's part of the things that I believe they're discussing, and right about now the president is about meeting the Chinese president for a bilateral, and we'll get the details and update you appropriately.
Makutu, we all know that there's no free lunch anywhere. Africa is sure glad to have this grant, but then it must be utilized well so that it can repay in whatever form that it has to. Thank you very much, our correspondent, foreign desk correspondent, Makutu Simon Macham, who just joined us via Skype from Beijing in China. We have other guests in the studio to continue this discussion on the FOCAC 2018. And we have Ambassador Chuka Udedibia. He's a former deputy head of mission of the Nigerian embassy in China. Thank you very much, Ambassador Udedibia, for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Also here with us in the studio is Professor Yusuf Ali Zwaka. He's a Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Abuja. Thank you for joining us, Prof.
Thank you. Good morning.
Let's start with Ambassador. You were in China at some point, and you know that China is now trying to foreign to Africa, so to say, as to cement its stance as a world leader. What are your views about this and the FOCAC 2018?
Of course, I'm very pleased about it.
for a very long time. While in China, we had advocated closer relationship between Nigeria, not Africa, and China, because we witnessed the rapid growth of Chinese economy. We saw the trajectory, we saw the direction, and of course we brought this to the attention of the Nigerian government, the military government at the time. Luckily for Nigeria, that was the period that Nigeria was isolated from the rest of the world. And Nigeria's only friend at that time was China, because the Western world and other key countries, as far as economic power is concerned, treated Nigeria as a pariah nation. So the government, Nigeria, the federal government, listened to us, and then the first major joint commission between Nigeria and the People's Republic of China took place in 1995. That opened the door for a close relationship or economic relations between Nigeria and China. Well, I regret to say that successive regimes in Nigeria had not continued the process, but I'm happy that we are back to a closer relationship with China. So on the whole, I think it's quite a very good development, that we are now forging much closer relationship with China, and China is also doing the same with us. It's a relationship based on mutual benefit, just like the outcome document of the FOCAC indicated, that this is a win-win situation, on both sides, on both China and Africa, and in this case, Nigeria.
All right, thank you, Ambassador Udodibia. I will return to you. Let's get the views of Professor Ali Zuaka. Professor Ali Zuaka, give us your context of FOCAC, that's to say the China-Africa Forum on Cooperation, as well as the resolutions arrived at the just concluded summit. What does this pertain for global politics, and in particular, the interests of Africa and Nigeria?
Yeah, you see, for me, the Chinese are actually, a rising power, and as a global player, because they have also established, within a very short period of time, some rapid economic development, in China, and for them, they want to promote a peaceful world. Now they promote peace in the world globally. You now try to promote some form of inclusiveness, around the world, and therefore you are thinking in terms of what will be beneficial. So the relationship they are trying to establish is that is based on exploitation of the Africans, but that will also contribute to the development of Africa. And that is why you find, maybe arising from the last FOCAC, the previous one before this one, about $16 billion also given. And there were about 10 cooperative plans that were, brought out. That was to, carry out, some kind of, help Africa, and most countries that are willing to, actually, take advantage of what was being provided to, stimulate, some kind of, the infrastructure that is not there. There's infrastructure deficit within the African continent. Our roads are not, properly, developed. We don't have, even the agricultural sector is not properly, developed. Then you have, issues about insecurity and health challenges. And they're also thinking in terms of trying to inject, programs and projects that will at least alleviate poverty. And therefore, they came up with they were going to provide about 200,000, vacancies for training of, artisans and people that will at least be able to get some form of self-employment, and created, this people-to-people relationship by ensuring that there is exchange between the two sides. So you have, African intellectuals visiting China and the Chinese intellectuals coming down here, and there are companies also coming to Nigeria and participating in several developmental projects, in Nigeria. The recent one being, of course, the airport in Abuja, the terminal that was recently commissioned. And you see that, they are injecting and creating employment, within the African continent. I think even there are instances where people are thinking that they are trying to colonize or recolonize Africa. But I think that argument will not really hold water, because they are being accused right now that they are giving, third world countries too much debt, and that these countries will be having the weight. They will not be, the debt burden will be so, and they are moving virtually into a debt trap that most of them will not be able to pay. And I think, sometimes they try also to write off some of these debts that African countries are owing, and then try to give grants and also give a very liberal payment method, so that it doesn't really...
Is this Sino-Africa relationship, particularly the emerging coloration of it that we're seeing, for instance, with FOCAC, is it an issue, for instance, that is engaging scholars and analysts with respect to what the consequences might be, positive or otherwise, going forward? Because if you made a comparative analysis, for instance, of the debt overhang that virtually crippled Africa in the 1980s, and the kind of projects that they invested in, what kind of projects are we seeing the Chinese come in now? Is this likely to play out the same way as we saw with the indebtedness of the 80s and 90s?
No, it's not likely going to be the same, because in this case that we're having now, the debts are targeted at, infrastructure, for instance, and if you are constructing roads or railway lines, they are there. So they invest in things that can be seen. But when we take what happened, in the past, where, because it is actually US and some European countries that are actually trying to, create this, they're accusing China that China is not financially disciplined, and that they don't obey certain procedures for giving, assistance or even promoting foreign direct investment. So in the case of what we are seeing with the Chinese, I think they're a little bit, we can call it some form of capitalism with human face, compared to what we had in the past. Because they said they are practicing what they call socialism with Chinese characteristics. What they have done is to indigenize. Our problem is that we don't normally domesticate anything. We just bring something from outside, land, hook and sinker, and want to operate it without. Things don't work like that, because the environment within which that team was developed is not the same. And so, if you don't take into cognizance some of these issues, you're not likely going to make, progress in your society. So I think the scenario is a little bit different.
Thank you, Prof. Yes, please. I was going to come to you on that. Is this a great gift? Is it meant to make Africa sink deeper into debt? What's China trying to achieve?
Thank you very so much for that. Now, first of all, these are two different scenarios. First of all, on fears about possible debt trap on African countries, I don't think we really should be worried, because the global debt stock of African countries is about 6 trillion. Most of them owed to, if you like, the Western countries or institutions established by the Western countries. And currently, African countries owe about $130 billion to China, which represents only about 2% of Africa's global debt stock. Well, with the new $60 billion that the Chinese government has pledged, maybe in the end it will represent less than 3% of the global debt stock. But the interesting thing is that why I said there are two different scenarios is that, you see, following the Bretton Woods arrangement, most of the loans that African countries obtained were multilateral loans from the International Monetary Fund, which, of course, like you know, is part of the Bretton Woods institutions. And whether we like it or not, it's a business venture. The countries that control the funds of the IMF and have put their financial resources there. Some other countries go there to borrow, and they make profit from interest payments by these countries. So there is that level detachment from the purposes, the loan or the financial assistance, or loan, as whatever one may want to call it, are meant to serve, and the countries or institutions giving the loan. Secondly, the motivation is business-oriented. We give you loan. One particular loan granted to a particular African country could be there for 100 years. The country keeps servicing the loan. The capital is still there. But in this case, there is involvement of both Chinese government and the African country concerned.
Right.
And there's an extension to that. There's another important linkage, and that is the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, the Belt and Road Initiative, first of all, is linked to the 2030 UN Sustainable Development Goals. Number two, is linked to Agenda 2063 of the African Union. And the most important aspect is that it's also linked to the strategic development plan of the country itself. In case of Nigeria, National Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. Nigeria is the country concerned that identifies the project and then engages the Chinese authorities in dialogue based on arrangements by FOCAP. So the country benefits directly. The Chinese government, of course, is involved. So it is a more progressive arrangement, for the countries concerned, on bilateral basis, than what the arrangements we have had with the international multilateral.
Can we have some more insight into the Belt and Road program or project?
Yes, that's a good one, because it's the Belt and Road Initiative, which used to be called One Belt, One Road Initiative, actually goes beyond Africa. It's not only African countries. There are 68 countries that are involved. And the essence is to build one link, part of South-South cooperation, if you like, with China if you like, driving the entire process. Now, there is trade involved, investment in these African countries, and most importantly, linkages through road construction, that is roads, airways, railways, and then, of course, financing for development in all these countries that are concerned. And just like my friend here mentioned, infrastructure, including especially power, because power is the energy with which a country moves. And if you look at the Chinese investments in most of these African countries based on the programs of FOCAP, these have been the focus, all these areas. And it's the same in some other countries. And the 60 billion, incidentally also, the reporter, your anchor in Beijing, there was some kind of acclamation when the amount was announced. But to be frank with you, in my own view, I think African countries were expecting something higher. Because 60 billion was pledged at the Johannesburg summit 3 years ago. And if you see the trend, the first summit in 2006 came up with 5 billion. Of course, it kept increasing, until 60 billion was pledged in Johannesburg. So they thought the trend would continue. And then incidentally, it was the same for the first time. The same amount that was pledged at the previous summit was also pledged this time.
I'm wondering, Ambassador Udedibe and Professor Alizwaka, there's something that perhaps we also need our viewers to have the benefit of. You served in China. Can we have an insight into the Chinese mind and therefore how their government works and how their diplomatic machinery is fashioned, so that we can begin to make some projections as to what might happen 10, 20, 25 years down the road on account of the collaboration and cooperation that everyone is applauding.
I'm really very grateful for that question.
Answer it.
Yes. You see, because the Chinese mind is very important. China looks at the world from its history, you know, and when some African countries complain of the so-called negative effects of colonialism, the experience of China had been so devastating to the country that helped them to move ahead with determination. As we all know, the government that brought about change, positive change in China, was the government of Chairman Mao that took over through revolution in 1949. Why did they succeed? They succeeded because the government of Chiang Kai-shek allowed or was not able to stop the invasion of the Japanese that humiliated, not only occupied China for such a long time, but also humiliated the country. Up to today, the Chinese have not forgiven the Japanese for that. If Chairman Mao, regardless of whatever ideology, was able to defeat the nationalist party, you know, that eventually ran to Taiwan, that's still the government of Taiwan today, you know, it didn't matter to the Chinese what ideology that government came with. Incidentally, eventually that government has succeeded, but a major event occurred in 1978, you know, that brought about the reform that was brought about by Deng Xiaoping. So, for the Chinese, trust is very important. Chinese people trust Africans more than they trust the Western world. You know, they believe we don't constitute a threat to them. We are friends. You know, we can work together. You know, same with a number of developing countries. You know, in fact, even more of Africa than even some of their fellow Asian countries. As you know, there had been invasion of Vietnam. They had, you know, China had problems with so many of their neighbors within the Asian continent. But again, given the Chinese foreign policy of peaceful coexistence, we look down or ignore issues that divide us and work on those that bring us together, on which we have that kind of mutual benefit. So this, in a nutshell, is the kind of the mind, you know, that the Chinese have. And that principle, 5 principles of peaceful coexistence is very, very important to the Chinese system, not just government, you know, because once the Chinese evolve a particular foreign policy that they see as fundamental, you know, it doesn't matter which government in China that comes to power, it stays.
And that's very important. Thank you, Ambassador. Let's go back to you, Prof. Talking about trust here and the mind of the Chinese, as we go deeper into the specifics of what is it in it for Africa, specifically Nigeria. We talked about power, improvement in power, infrastructural development generally. Can the Chinese now trust African leaders to use this money for what they are meant for, and then to let this what will come out of it trickle down to the people for developmental growth?
You see, for the Chinese, I think in rolling out some of these policies, one thing they have avoided is interfering in the affairs. And that's why I find that they don't lay down any conditionality as such, like we get when we are taking loans from the West. They say you have to remove subsidy, you have to do also privatization. All this. They don't have that kind of, you know, they try to allow, you know, because they know that how do you try to work as...
That's where the issue of trust comes in, when there are no conditionalities.
Yeah, so you find that, and that's why the West is saying that they don't respect financial principles and procedures, because they expect that, you know, they should have some conditions that should be given to, from this funding that they are giving to African countries. So the Chinese, to some extent, actually trust African, countries. But when you look at it, they don't have any problem with the political system that you're running, and that's why, despite the fact that we are largely a pro-West capitalist country, they are not concerned with that. They look at what are the common things that we have that they can work with. Nigeria happens to be also the largest black population, in the entire world. They are the largest population in the world in terms of their numbers. They also look at, the kind of resources that we have and what they also have over there. They are advanced in technology, and they are also seeing how can they help. And I think even now happens to be a very good time for us because they tend to have a lot of trust, for our president, particularly because they see him as somebody that is very honest, he has integrity, and therefore you can see he paid a visit to China first before now making a visit, during this FOCAC. And therefore you will find when you go to the eastern part of Africa, a lot of their investment and the role lines, because what they're trying to do also is to integrate, create some kind of network within the continent that we can even, have some, trade among ourselves. Because even now, when you want to travel, if you take what has happened in the past, when you want to travel out of Nigeria, if you're using all these foreign country airline, they take you first to their capital, wherever you're going to. It's all like with Ethiopian airline. If you're traveling to anywhere, they take you first to Ethiopia before they take you to where you're traveling to. So what they are trying to do is how do you now promote some form of, free movement within the country of Africa? And that's why when you take the Belt and Road Initiative that they brought in, and what they are looking at is the population that is going to be involved, about 62% of the world population, about 4.4 billion people. Then when you take the volume of, what is required in terms of, the infrastructure they want to create, the harbors they are going to establish around, right, moving from China into Europe and then to Africa. And then most countries it is something that is very free. You are the ones to join. They don't make it compulsory for anybody. If you think you also want to participate in this inclusiveness, in trade, in trying to promote a very peaceful world, then I think the Chinese are the ones that are getting it very correctly.
There is something he said I would like to comment on. Of course, I agree with entirely. And that is that issue of trust on the part of China. This is also a situation where trust begets trust. You see, now, the African countries have found China to be a reliable, stable, and dependable partner. In fact, in line with what he has said, China is usually not interested in political or economic system of a particular country. Whether there is upheaval in a particular country, whether it's ruled by a military regime, whether it's democratic or whatever system that country is operating, is not of interest to China. China, as far as China is concerned, that country is there and will continue to exist. They are relating with the country, not with the system. So they invest, and that pleases African countries a lot because, many African countries, even where the principle of democracy or system of democracy is practiced, it may not be, there could be some human rights concerns, for some Western countries that may make it difficult for them to grant some of these facilities.
I'm wondering, Ambassador Deribe, let me interject there and pose this question to you.
Yes.
From what we are seeing coming out of China, is Nigeria positioning herself to maximize the opportunities arising from China's foray into Africa? Because, especially since the advent of the Fourth Republic, we have seen various governments, national and subnational governments, mounting investment roadshows, looking for foreign investors. And here we are now celebrating what the Chinese are doing. Are we positioning ourselves to maximize these opportunities out of China?
Well, it depends on the successive Nigerian governments. because China, on bilateral basis, has engaged Nigeria a number of decades since its emergence, or since its reform started in 1978, especially since the 1990s. Especially since the 1990s. Incidentally, some of the efforts Nigeria as a country had made for closer bilateral economic cooperation or relationship with China failed because some of the governments even canceled some of the arrangements, some were not implemented or followed up, and of course some other extra, some other factors, came into play, whereas on the part of China, they were committed to all the arrangements that are arrived at with Nigeria. So right now, like you said, we've gone back to China. We have started disengagement once again, So, but what I don't know is whether future governments in Nigeria, based on our experience of the past, will retain this commitment that we have today.
Thank you, Ambassador. We have a few tweets from our viewers, and Adini Ibelo says, I see advantage in technology that will be of great importance to Nigeria.
Sunday in Young tweets, our businessmen should use this opportunity to tell Chinese companies to start manufacturing quality products and sending them to the Nigerian market.
And Ogbeni Omogbolahon says, apart from the additional $60 billion fund from China, there are potentials of additional employment opportunities for the vast majority of Nigerians in critical sectors of the economy. Let the federal government put machinery in motion to harness these potentials.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Professor Zoaka, is it necessarily the case that there isn't quid pro quo with regard to the Chinese grants or aid or soft loans to Africa? I'm asking this question against the background of the experience of some African countries. Take, for example, Zimbabwe. Once the West declared Robert Mugabe and his government a pariah, therefore persona non grata to European capitals, they looked to the East. But there have been allegations of mining companies, particularly from the Far East, that have taken undue advantage of the relationship, between those Far Eastern countries, including China, of course, and Zimbabwe. So what does this therefore mean in terms of the weariness of African countries in inking whatever deals the Chinese are presenting to the African continent?
You see, sometimes even the Chinese themselves will tell you that they don't hold companies that are, because these people are doing business, so they cannot hold them responsible, if they are violating any rules or any laws. We have all this illegal mining, even within Nigeria, of some Chinese nationals that are involved, in some of this kind of business here in Nigeria. And I don't think it's something that is maybe restricted, to, Zimbabwe or wherever you find them. You also find, it's just, crime goes on in every society, and you can find criminals in any kind of national, so we cannot say that all the Chinese coming into Nigeria will be doing the right thing. In fact, some of us have queried, some of their, some of the companies who are employing Nigerians and underpaying them.
Thank you very much, Prof. We have to end this conversation now as we have another topic of discussion. Thank you, Ambassador Chuka Udedibia. We appreciate your time. And Professor Yusuf Ali Zoaka, thank you also for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Africa is taking advantage of the recognition given to traditional healthcare system by the World Health Organization, WHO, as they have set aside the 31st of August every year as Africa Traditional Medicine Day. This year's focus was on local manufacturing of traditional medical products. We take a break now and return to further this conversation. Please stay with us.
You are watching NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. For more information and news updates, visit our website at www.nta.ng, or you can follow us on Twitter at NTA News Now, or you can like us on Facebook at NTA Network News. Stay connected on our YouTube channels at www.youtube.com/NTA News Online. Watch our live stream at www.nta.ng/live. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
And like I was telling you earlier, Africa is taking advantage of the recognition given to traditional healthcare system by the World Health Organization, WHO, as they have set aside the 31st of August every year as Africa Traditional Medicine Day. This year's focus was on local manufacturing of traditional medical products. We'll now take a backgrounder to this report from our correspondent, Chimdima Ndubisi.
Africa has abundant medicinal plants, with sub-Saharan Africa alone said to have more than 50,000 species. Statistics show that Nigeria accounts for about 8,000 of such herbs used in producing medical products. Ibrahim Mohammed is among the 70 to 80% of Africa's population said to be currently using traditional medicine. He attests to its efficacy.
I take about 42 drips. I are doing well. Where I went to home, they bring the local one. I have to be well in 7 days.
Malaria, diabetes, hypertension. A lot of remedy have been developed.
From the products of traditional medicine, you can produce cosmetics. There will be farmers who will be cultivating the raw materials. Women, that will be excellent forum for job creation.
Records also indicate that 25 to 45% of the world's pharmaceutical products are derived from medicinal plants. With these benefits and potential, it leaves a bad taste in the mouth of some health experts that Africa is minimally benefiting from global herbal medicine. Shortfalls traditional medicine practitioners attribute to challenges encountered in the practice.
Marketing, manpower, the machineries. We want to establish a botanical garden.
The Nigerian government is, however, placing traditional medicines in the nation's health system by training practitioners, formulating policies, codes and ethics, as well as developing more than 300 species of medicinal plants in every state.
This year's commemoration urges utilization of medicinal plants for finished products. Government shall support research and create liaison with those traditional healers with a head start in the knowledge of these plants to develop, formulate, and commercialize research findings into pharmaceutical, medicinal products.
There are therefore calls for more collaboration in research to improve quality and quantity of locally manufactured products and proper regulation for affordable essential medicines.
All right, thank you very much there for that backgrounder. We have guests with us here in the Abuja studios as well as from our Lagos Network Center to join in this conversation. First, we'd like to welcome Dr. Obi Adigwe. Adigwe is the Director General of the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development. Dr. Adigwe, a pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Kingsley.
Also here with us in the studios, Hajia Zainab Sharif. We've had her from time to time on Good Morning Nigeria. She's head of the Department, Traditional, Contemporary and Alternative Medicine of the Federal Ministry of Health. Hajia Zainab, pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Pleasure to be here.
Also another guest, fairly frequent but not in recent times, Dr. Bello Abubakar. Dr. Abubakar, of course, is Chief Consultant, Clinical and Radiation Oncologist and Head Department of Oncology at the National Hospital in Abuja. For those who are not familiar with all these big names, he's a cancer expert. Dr. Bello Abubakar, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Good morning.
Okay.
Happy to be here again.
And from our Lagos Network studios, Mrs. Rametu Momodu, who is Deputy Director, who is in charge of Herbal Medicine Regulation Desk of NAFDAC. She's joining us, as we said, from Lagos. Mrs. Momodu, pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now let's begin. We will start off with Hajia Zainab Sharif with us here in the Abuja studios. Let's have an understanding, if you like, of, shall we say, contemporary understanding of traditional medicine and what it entails. Because as you very well know, once you mention traditional medicine, there seems to be confusion with divination, you know, jazz, you know, babalawo, you know, medi, muti, all kinds of names.
Whatever they want to say it.
So, yeah.
Let me start by saying traditional medicine, just like you say traditional foods, just like you say traditional dancing. I don't think you raise eyebrows on that. But traditional medicine, as defined, especially in the African context, are practices, either in theory or handed down. I'm trying to simplify it, from experiences in the art of healing, diagnosis, treatment of diseases that are peculiar to a nation or to a country. And using what they have, especially in terms of resources, medicinal plant resources, to treat these ailments, prevent them, and be able to use them further in the modern day science for the discovery of more medicines in terms of drugs or phytomedicines. So these practices are indigenous to us. That is why in the African context, we call it African medicine, black medicine, medicine of the people, medicine of the community. Having said that, before the coming of the colonial masters, Africans, how were we treating our people? We had diseases. So we're using these affordable medicines that God gave to us to manage these ailments before the coming of the conventional medicine, which we call the allopathic medicine or the orthodox medicine, which now came in with also science in treating ailments, but not without certain observations, because the pharmaceutical medicines we use today, about 25 to 40% of them were medicinal plants, and they were from the traditional medicine origin, because science made it that these practitioners, whom the Chinese call the barefoot doctors, knew those plants, knew where they were using them for, and had a collaboration with them to be able to discover medicine for the benefit of our people.
Thank you, Hajia Sharif. Let's go to Dr. Adigwe. Just like Hajia said, these are plants that grow around us, that people know what they're used for. There's been a lot of research into traditional medicine lately, despite the aversion to them. What has been your experience in the research and development of this medicine?
Well, currently the evidence suggests that about 2,000 to 8,000 species of plants in Nigeria have potential for ethnopharmacy or ethnomedicine. And a significant amount of research has been done on some of these products. However, where there has been a gap is translating research to products that can actually start to improve healthcare for Nigerians. And that's one of the areas where the government, the current administration, is focusing on. And it's very clear that there is political will in ensuring that the available research is translated to medicines and products for the people. And also that other products that have potential, for which, practitioners have not had the confidence to come out and engage with the, research institutes, with the ministries, with the various relevant bodies who can help progress these things along the value chain, are now being, mainstreamed into the process. And you're very aware that in NIPRID, a number of products have been in the pipeline. Recently, it was in the news that one of the products, Naprisan, has been signed up. The government signed up a partnership with May and Baker. That's a product for sickle cell. And it's a significant landmark, because you know how serious sickle cell is. And what we're trying to do now is to, put together a framework
which I like to call SNL, you know, synergies and linkages. Synergies in that now that there's a political will, you know, the various government agencies who have responsibilities for different parts of moving that process along, synergize properly. And in synergizing properly, you know, stakeholders and practitioners take advantage of existing government policies. So for instance, Executive Order number 1, ease of doing business. Most of the people who have the traditional medicine practitioners may not have companies, you know, and without them being corporate, you know, entities, it's difficult for them to engage, get loans, you know, write letters and all that. So we're looking at synergizing to ensure that, you know, things like Executive Order number 1 is put in place for these guys. They get, you know, the adequate access for that. Executive Order number 3 that talks about procurement by MDAs. You know, make sure that when the products come out, MDAs will, you know, in different categories that are, you know, relevant to them, MDAs will prioritize procurement from them. Executive Order number 5, which talks about science and tech. When they get to the level where they start to partner with other people, the science and technology transfer to Nigeria is prioritized, and we make sure that we build capacity here in Nigeria.
All right, Dr. Adigwe, thank you very much. Let's bring in now Dr. Bello Abubakar. Dr. Abubakar, there's always been, if you like, the age-long tension between orthodox medical practitioners and traditional healthcare givers. Are we seeing a new dawn in terms of the rise of traditional healthcare givers, and if so, how will orthodox medical practitioners react to this?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. I don't really know whether it's an age-old tradition of fighting between the traditionalists and then the orthodox doctors. But suffice to say, you know, in the context of the orthodox medicine, one is trained. You go through the rudimentary training of becoming a doctor, becoming a specialist, learning pharmacology, pharmacopoeia, and so on and so forth. Unlike the traditional medicine, where in some instances, a lot of the things that you see on a daily basis are basically what you have inherited over the years, like Hajia has mentioned. You know, most of our traditional healers actually are inheriting from their parents and so on and so forth. I still remember my biochemistry teacher used to say that there is no poison but dose. So dose is critical. As she mentioned, 25% or more of our drugs are actually from plants and so on. And before you develop one drug, say a cancer drug, it takes about 10 to 15 years. It goes through a lot of rudimentary processes. And then at the end of the day, you will be able to know what are the side effects of the drug, what is the dose, what is the tolerant dose, what are the toxic things that you are expecting to see, and so on and so forth. So any drug that I'm administering to you, I would know how it works on your system, what are the side effects I'm expecting to see, and how to manage them. Unfortunately, up to this point, in Africa especially, we've not been able to develop a curriculum that will, you know, streamline, you know, the art of traditional healing, or as it were. Unlike in China, I went to China and I saw that in a pharmacy shop, you have orthodox medicine on one side as well as traditional medicine on the other side. And you have a trained pharmacist who will advise you on what to take at a particular time. I would love to see a situation where we can have that instead of what we are doing today. You know, people keep assuming that yes, I can cure cancer, for example, with my drugs. We don't know how it works. You try to talk to the people, and then it doesn't get through. So these are the concerns that orthodox medicine have always had. And there, when you live in Africa, where there's a lot of poverty, and orthodox medicine are extremely expensive, people tend to go back to the traditionals. But you cannot recognize who are the real traditionalists that know exactly the treatment that they are giving you, because it's difficult to regulate what you don't actually have a guideline. There are no guidelines in treatment with traditional medicine. You have people on radio advertising that one type of plant can cure literally everything, and then so how do you regulate those kind of things? I mean, there is one radio on, I think it's a Suleja radio. I mean, every time I put it on for hours, they're advertising. Orthodox medicine are not even allowed to advertise. But these people keep advertising that they treat malaria, typhoid fever, they treat gonorrhea, they treat infertility with the same type of drug. And they treat cancers as well. And our people...
Staff, what they call staff.
Yes, and then staff, exactly. as my microbiologist would say, leave me with my staff. But they cure all sorts of things. And at the end of the day, they waste the time of the patient, and by the time the patient is presenting to the orthodox hospital, it is almost too late. The DG made mention of a very important drug, that the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development were able to produce, dinacrosan, for sickle cell anemia. It took them over 15 years to develop that. I remember since the time of Professor Charles Wambebe, that was the time that they started using the drug. They had to go back to the drawing board at a point when there were some concerns, and then now they are able to actually get it as a trademark. So traditional medicine, yes, has always been part of us. We are not fighting them. We will not fight them. We will encourage them, as it is being encouraged in China, to be able to have guidelines so that people will go to a shop and know exactly the type of drug they are getting, whether it's traditional or orthodox, and be able to say, yes, I took so drug with a name. Most of the people these days that take traditional medicine don't even know where it's coming from. So you are at the mercy of the person, and even the regulators. I keep asking the National Medical and Dental Council that regulate these practices, what are you exactly regulating? You cannot regulate what you don't actually know. So this is the concerns that the orthodox medicine had against the traditional medicine.
Thank you, Dr. Abubakar. We'll take your concerns right straight to Mrs. Rametu Momodu of NAFDAC in Lagos. There are so many traditional doctors now, and some can swear by their efficacy, those who patronize them regularly. But then, how do you regulate these people so that, according to the concerns raised by Dr. Abubakar, people would know what they're taking and can swear that they were killed by whatever it is that they were taking?
Thank you very much for the question. Let me state first that NAFDAC derives its powers to regulate packaged herbal medicines from the law that sets it up. And then we have regulations, and these regulations spells out clearly the requirements that manufacturers need to meet in order for their products to be registered. The major problem we have with this sector is the non-standardization of the product. Non-standardization and the inability to meet up with the requirements and be set up. But within our mandates and our regulations and in line with the executive orders, we have scaled down a lot of these requirements to accommodate the small micro manufacturers of herbal preparations. Again, they need to meet up with these requirements if they want to be registered. There are two kinds of registration. We have the listing and we have the full registration for 5 years. The listing registration is usually for 2 years, and this is just based on historical claims. These are products that we have not verified the efficacy, I mean, as stated by WHO. So we can't register them based on historical claims of efficacy. So what we usually would do is test that they are not toxic. We do toxicity tests in the laboratory. Then for products that the efficacy has been verified, it has gone through clinical trials, then they receive a registration for 5 years. The Director General, Professor Mojisola Adeyeye, has set up a committee, and this committee is to work on a framework for the standardization of herbal products. And I mean, she's worked a lot in this area as well, and we are, I mean, not just only herbal preparations, we are, this committee, we want to work with the academic institutions, you know, as it were, to translate whatever research it is into products. And I mean, she's devoted to this. We had a program last week where we were talking with stakeholders, and she stated clearly there, we're customer focused and agency minded. This is something that is high up on the agenda. We want to upscale the way these products are manufactured, you know, to ensure that they provide maximum benefits to people.
So, Mamadou, stay with you in our Lagos Network studios. Dr. Adigwe mentioned something with regard to the mode of operation of most of the traditional healthcare givers. These are usually, as you would find, either family businesses or more like it, sole proprietorship. They are neither partnerships nor you find them as corporate entities. How then do you monitor several, if you like, hundreds of thousands of practitioners in different parts of the country? That's one leg. Second leg of the question, because we're getting pressed for time now. What has been the response of NAFDAC to the seeming free reign that some of the traditional healthcare givers are having with regard to advertising? Dr. Bello spoke about that. I mean, one product is often reputed, according to them, to be the silver bullet to cure all kinds of things, malaria, infertility, and in some cases they will say, don't let staph kill you. You know, take this. Question. Did you hear my question? Maybe we're having audio challenges. If our director could let us know what the situation is, I could repeat the question to you. The first question I was asking that, look, you have perhaps hundreds of thousands of traditional healthcare givers. How do you monitor such number of persons who are neither corporate entities nor partnerships? They are mostly sole proprietorships. That's one leg. And second leg has to do with regulated advertising of traditional healthcare products, you know, curing, pretending or purporting to cure all kinds of ailments in a single vial.
Thank you. Like I said in the beginning, our mandate is to regulate packaged herbal medicines. We don't regulate the practice as it were. And in regulating the herbal medicines, we look at the manufacturing facility. We go on inspections to ensure that they comply with the requirements of good manufacturing practice and good hygienic practices. We also have a process of licensing, as I said earlier, licensing, and then there are two types. We also engage in continuous monitoring. Even after these products are registered, we go out to collect samples from time to time to evaluate and to make sure that they meet the same quality by which they were registered. We have offices in all the states in Nigeria, including the Federal Capital Territory. So we are able to engage these people in the different states. I think that would answer that question. And to answer the question about adverts, yes, we hear a lot of adverts and to see a lot of adverts. Part of our mandate is also to regulate the adverts of herbal medicines and other regulated products. And we have an enforcement and investigative arm who look at this, and when there are violations, we usually bring these people to the office, seize the products, and there are regulatory actions that are taken against them. Yes, there are a lot of it, but that's not to say we're not doing anything. We're doing a lot, and we're getting a lot of results out of this. Talking about the registration, I'd like to go back to that a bit. We see, yes, I mentioned a lot of claims. However, products that are allowed to make claims are the products that have undergone clinical trials. And for products that have not undergone clinical trials, they are not allowed to, which is why you will see on some products where the disclaimer label that says that these claims have not been evaluated by NAFDAC. But the DG has a vision, and we are taking this on in the sense that we're trying to, as part of the terms of reference of the committee, is also to engage academia to help these people to verify these claims, because once the claims are verified, then they are allowed to make it and allowed to declare it. The DG has worked in this area, so she can lead this effort very well. And so going forward, I think we're going to have a lot more products that the claims have been verified, and it will benefit our people, because then they can be sure that as they take these products, they will get the promised benefit for the indications.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Momodu. I will come to you, Hajia Sharif. Still talking about regulation, dosage, and everything, the points she has brought up. In fact, I would even want to add that this kind of medicines may not even be popular, but because of poverty and some other factors. Because I remember that as children, when we went to our grandmother, they would want to give you agbo, and it's so bitter that once you see the bottle or the cup, you just took to your heels and ran away. So it's not like they are so popular. Maybe some of the factors are responsible for the reasons for why people are going after these things when they even know that they're unverified.
You know, I get worried when we keep on saying the same thing every time. For many years, you cannot say traditional medicine has not developed. We need to understand the stages we have gone through. Sure. But the purpose of clarity, and for viewers out there, is very important. They realize that the WHO has established and recognized 3 healthcare systems.
Okay.
The orthodox, which we don't have argument. The traditional, which is indigenous to you. WHO has accepted it that you need to develop it. And the complementary medicine. Those 2 healthcare systems are what we now call integrative medicine. It is practiced all over. It's practiced in UK, in US, Africa.
Particularly Asia.
So Nigeria is no exception. We should not be criticizing practitioners all the time. For goodness sake, their knowledge is given to them by God. That is natural knowledge. For us who went to science, we acquired the knowledge by human beings, trained us. So who is more realistic is this knowledge? The one given to God by God is more realistic. But the way what we are saying is that for now, the government has done a lot. Dr. Bello said he doesn't have no policies. Let me clearly state that. The Ministry of Health has established traditional medicine policy as far back as 2007. We have gone ahead to establish herbal pharmacopoeia in 2008, where we have collection of these therapeutic drugs. Medicines, plants, so that we can use it for formulation. And we have also gone to train some of these practitioners. And we have established a committee for the curriculum of training of herbal medicine practitioners. Ghana, your next door neighbor, offers a degree in herbal medicine. Nigeria has started. So we are not left behind. And that is why there is a collaboration with NIPRID. NIPRID was set up because of herbal medicines, to be able to evaluate this herbal medicine. And again, for the purpose of clarity, there is a value chain in drug discovery. For medicinal plants, you start from the plants to drugs. Herbal medicines are not treated in the same way as orthodox drugs. Along the value chain of discovery of medicines, you can go by the side. You have the side of herbal medicine coming in. You have the side of standardized herbal products coming in. These are the ones you call phytomedicines. These are the ones you call nutritional supplements. Then you keep on going because you want to discover drug, whereby you are now looking at the active principles you want to extract. When people talk about drugs and compare it with herbal medicine, we are all getting it wrong. Drug discovery, like doctor said, takes 15 years. And you need to spend about $58 million For goodness sake, as a Nigerian, I feel sad. Have you ever heard any drug has been discovered from Africa? Do you know why? Because you will not be allowed to discover. You must come to your own locality. We must use the science we have, just like the Chinese have done, just like the Indians have done. When they talk of Ayurvedic medicine, they practice it all over the world. Nobody hinders them because Ayurveda is their national language. Chinese traditional medicine, they call it Taoism. You cannot deprive them. For goodness sake, it is time for us to be able to recognize, like she said, you cannot, NAFDAC does not have mandate to regulate the practitioners. We are talking about practice and products. They are in charge of the products. They have the right. But for the practice, currently, we are passing the bill, is currently with the Ministry of Justice. The Traditional Medicine Council bill that will take care of that aspect of regulation. Just like we have the Dental and the Medical Council, Pharmacists Council, Nursing and Midwifery Council. So it is time, with the strong political will. Nigeria, we have really not been very forthcoming in promoting our own. That was why the African Heads of State in 2001 decided to set it aside a decade for African traditional medicine. Let's see how we can make our own better, even for the African region. The decade has now been extended to 2020. So when we keep on saying they don't know anything, they need to be protected by intellectual property rights.
Sure, they know something.
So when we get the knowledge from them, there is a collaboration, there is a cooperation. The guy who brought Niprisan was a traditional medicine practitioner. He brought the products, Niprisan went ahead, NAFDAC went ahead, NIPRID went ahead for research.
We're pressed for time, Hajia.
Yes.
Hajia,
Yes.
I mean, we know you were very passionate about this issue, but let's get this right. The traditional healthcare givers, they are virtually in all nooks and crannies
Everywhere
of the
in
country.
the communities, they are there.
That's right.
Yes.
And the products that they dispense, to say that's the standardization that people are complaining
That is
about.
what we are talking about.
It's the standardization. How do you go and meet a healer? Is the healer going to recommend you to a pharmacist who is let's say a traditional pharmacist who will give you the drug, or he will tell you the dosage and so on and so forth? How do you standardize this along
that value chain? I'm
yes.
telling you. That is what I've clearly said. With our collaboration with them now, with the cooperation, when you practice the 3 care health systems, which is integrative medicine, the practitioner knows his level. He is supposed to make a reference system. He cannot do that. And with the incoming of more products, standardized extract, phytomedicines, we now know. Our concern for us is that how do we integrate traditional medicine into the healthcare delivery system?
Hajia, I'll have to stop you there just so we can get very briefly the final thoughts, your final thoughts on this, Dr. Adigwe.
Yes, I think there needs to be inclusiveness. They need to be included. The potential for traditional medicine is huge. In the next couple of decades, it's going to hit $7 trillion worldwide. And we've got the potential, we've got the correct political will now. We all need to put our hands together and get this done.
Thank you. And you, Dr. Abubakar, your final thoughts very briefly.
Well, I know Hajia is very passionate about all these things, and I've watched her program and so on. But I still want to emphasize that, you see, as a clinician, it is very important to recognize when do you have illness that you will go to a traditional healer or when you go to the hospital. Because most of the people that go to the traditional healers, they don't know the doses they are giving them. That is the honest truth. We see patients coming, cancer cases coming at stage 4 because they have wasted so much time with the traditional healers. So we need to recognize that and be able to come at the right time.
Thank you very
Dr.
much.
Bello Abubakar, I don't know. That's, that's the most that we can take. Perhaps going forward, as the practice will be standardized, maybe traditional healthcare givers can look at certain areas of specialization. Let's take orthopedic medicine, for instance. In those days, if you broke a limb, they would take a cockerel and also break its own. So when that one is healing, you want to heal it. Sometimes the thing will come out, it will become K-leg.
Very true.
Become bow leg. Let's go over to Lagos and to appreciate Mrs. Rametu Momodu, Deputy Director in charge of Herbal Medicine Regulation Desk of NAFDAC. Mrs. Momodu, thank you very much for being with us on the program this morning.
Very much, sir.
And here with us in the studios, our appreciation to Dr. Obi Adigwe, who is DG of NIPRID. That's the Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development. Thanks a lot for being with us.
You're welcome.
Hajia Zainab Sharif, always a delight having you. Good morning, Nigeria.
It's a pleasure.
Head of Department, Traditional, Contemporary and Alternative Medicine, all rolled into one, Federal Ministry of Health.
Thank you.
And cancer specialist, Dr. Bello Abubakar, Head of Department of Oncology, National Hospital here in Abuja. Pleasure having you again on Good Morning, Nigeria.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now we'll take a quick look at the weather picture for the rest of the day. That's it on Good Morning Nigeria today. Join us again for another edition tomorrow. I am Sheung Olagunju.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolom. Sorry we couldn't take the other segments other than the weather. News out of New York. Rafael Nadal had a mountain to climb up until a couple of hours ago. 5 sets is qualified now for the semi-final along with Serena Williams. See you tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Good Morning Nigeria returns. To have a nice day. I'm Kingsley.